I've done my Zero to Hero course or watched my other lighting videos know how much I love to bring my lights close in the frame. This is because when I do this, I get beautiful, soft, even lighting and lovely transitions from highlight to shadow. The downside of this technique is the light's always in the frame. It's hard to avoid. So I have created a couple of tutorials here that's going to show you how to remove the light simply and easily using Lightroom. This is for absolute beginners. And for those of you that are a bit more advanced, I'm also going to show you how you can use this technique to remove lights using Photoshop. So let's start with the beginner's version, which is using Lightroom, not necessarily limited to beginners. I just use this technique for a whole string of images that I was needing to edit in a whole series of images of the same setup. So this is one of the shots here, and you can see that I have brought my light here, this octabox here, and what I'm trying to do is replicate the look of this little lamp. So what I wanted to do was cheat it so that this light looks like the model looks like he was being lit by this light. Now, Lightroom has gotten really good and its AI has improved, and I never loved using Lightroom for anything other than basic editing, white balance, adjusting my blacks, and I've done all of that with this exposure. I've adjusted the white balance and I'm left with this softbox that's in the screen. Now I could take this over into Photoshop and edit it really quickly using Photoshop, but what the issue is I had a whole series. I had about 20 different versions of this image where I had different expressions, and the client wanted all of them, and so I didn't want to be doing them all in Photoshop. So I experimented, and there is a really good way to remove it. And this is okay. You need to make sure that if you're going to do this in Lightroom, you want to make sure that you've got a clean, even background. So like a uniform background. You don't want to have like a brick wall or an outside location like this. It's not going to work in Lightroom. But if you've got like a basic background, so you're shooting with you're doing headshots against a plain background, you might have a white background, it might be a mid-grey, it might be a little bit darker like this, the technique is going to work. So I'll show you here. So in the develop module in Lightroom, I'm going to go to, I'm in the basic module. Just above that, there's this little icon here. It's a circle with an arrow. This is the spot removal tool. And you've got two options. You've got clone or heal. We're going to use the heal option, and you can change the size of your brush so you can see it here on the side. You can change it using this slider. You can also change the size of your brush using the bracket keys, all right, which is a good little shortcut. So you want to have the brush to be just slightly covering the area. What's also important is you add a little bit of a feather. So you can see that as I increase the feather, the internal radius gets smaller, and the basically, so what that means is it gives the brush a softer edge. So I think something like 25 for the feather will work well for this, and you can also change the opacity. So that's how much of an effect what you do takes. So look, I'll show you. So I've got my feather set, I've got my size set, I've got my image there on the screen, and it's just here, my octabox that I want to get rid of. So basically I just go over it like that. Give Lightroom a little bit of time to think about that, and bang, It's that easy. The reason I love using Lightroom for this technique is it allows you to edit multiple images at once. Now, provided when you do your shoot, you're set up to tripod, you make sure that once you get your shot lined up and you've got your focal length, you've got your light in the frame, basically nothing moves except for the model, okay? So everything stays the same because I'm shooting on tripod. Now, there is a reason for this. The reason I shoot like this is it saves a lot of time and effort in post-production. Now, in this instance, I've got this image where the client wanted lots and lots of these images edited, okay? Now, I could have taken these images, taken them across into Photoshop and edited in Photoshop and then gone on from there. But this is just so much faster, and it needs to be a plain background. That's very important, and no movement. And so basically what I do is open the develop module. I've got my edit tool selected here, spot removal, and I've got the heal tool selected, and I've got my size, feathering set to about 25. You can play with that, and then basically just come over and make sure as I'm holding down the mouse, I'm covering that entire area. All right, let it go. Lightroom has a think for a second, and boom, cleaned it up. It's so good. And now what I can do is I've got my first image selected, okay, and I can hit copy. A little dialog box will come up, and basically I'm saying to Lightroom, hey, Lightroom, I want you to copy everything that I just did to this file. So that includes the basic settings, where I adjusted the white balance, the exposure, contrast, highlights, blacks, okay? And I also want you to include the spot removal, so you've got to make sure that that is ticked as well. So hit copy, and Lightroom will go, okay, it's copied all of that, and now I can come along with my first image selected, holding down shift, and I can select a series of images. So all of these images have the softbox in them. Okay, I'll just show you quickly. So there they all are. So rather than having to spend all of that time in Photoshop, I have them all selected, and I can hit sync. And what that means, what that is doing, is I'm saying, hey Lightroom, take all the settings from this image and apply them to this image here. Okay, hit sync. It'll come up, it'll ask you again. It's very polite, Lightroom. Are you sure you want to do all of these things? Yes, Lightroom, I want to do all of these things. Hit synchronize. Lightroom thinks for a second, and boom, have a look at this. We have now cleaned up the light in every single one. This is so handy. Okay? And fantastic. Now, I want to show you the, so that's the image, and then I can take it away into Photoshop, and here's the final image where I've actually added a bit of color text to the computer screen, so the whole thing looks like a retro image. So this works really well for images like this, where you've got a plain background and there's nothing going on. Okay, so unfortunately, Lightroom is not sophisticated enough to be able to remove lights or light stands when there is a lot going on in an image. So when you don't have a plain background, when you're out on location, when you've got like clouds and sky and landscape in the shot, where you've got umbrellas like this shot. So there is a better way, a different way that needs to be used to remove a light, and I use Photoshop, but there is also a protocol when you're shooting. Now, there is a tutorial where you can use content aware fill in Photoshop at a pinch. That's if you've happen to have forgotten to use this technique to remove a light or a light stand. So if you are in a caught out and you forget to use this following protocol that I'm going to show you, you can always check out how to remove a light and a light stand using the Content Aware Fill tool in Photoshop. But I'm going to show you a slightly different way here. So there is a few ways you can do this, and the protocol is very similar in all of them. So first of all, you must shoot to tripod. Okay, so you've got the image set up, you set up your shot, frame it, expose it, and set your ISO, f-stop, shutter speed, frame it up, and nothing moves after you've got your shot in place. So I'm just continuing to shoot lots of different images, but the only thing that moves is the model, all right? And that is really important. So I'm just changing, I'm looking for expressions, I'm taking lots of shots, and obviously I've got my light in the frame. Once everything, I'm happy with the shot and I've got everything that I need, what I need to do then is I ask my assistant, or I'll do this myself if I'm shooting on my own, is I remove the light from the frame. But very important, don't move or change the position of your camera because and ask your model to stay in position. This is important because if you're shooting with autofocus, where the camera focuses is going to have a major impact on how the image looks. So you want to make sure that the camera is still focusing on the model's face. So obviously when I'm shooting this, I've got my focus point over the model's eye. So that never changes. And then the light is taken from the frame. I'm still focusing on the same spot and I take another shot. This is called my blank plate. So it's the image that doesn't have the light in it. Okay, so I've got image with the light, shoot all my shots, don't change anything, don't change the focus, don't move anything, take my blank plate. So now, to remove this light, all I need to do is select my shot, edit it as I normally would, and make sure that I copy and apply the same settings to my blank plate. So you can see here, there are all my settings. When you look at the blank plate, the settings are all the same. That's really important, so the two files are exactly the same in terms of tone and contrast and all the rest. So I select my first image and then select the second image. So I've got the two images selected. Right click, edit in, open as layers in Photoshop. We'll go to Photoshop. Photoshop will open those two images together. Put one on top of the other. Okay, so I have the shot that's got the octabox in it on top, and I've got my blank plate underneath. Now, I don't know if you notice this, but as I click on and off, you can see that even though I've shot to tripod, that they're slightly out of register. So the first thing I want to do is select both layers and go to Edit, Auto Align Layers. Okay, you get a little dialog box that comes up and you select Auto. And what that's doing is telling Photoshop, hey, take this image and line them up so that they're exactly in the same spot. All right, so hit OK. Photoshop thinks about that for a second, and now it does its magic and it's lining the images up. Now you can also do this manually if you need to. So let me just click on and off. I can now see that both the images are in exactly the same spot. Okay, so now what I need to do is remove the light to reveal the area where there's no light. And the way to do that is to add a layer mask. So it's this little icon here. And if you've not done any work with layer masks, I've got a detailed tutorial on how to use layer masks and just understanding them. So I suggest you go and check that out. But basically, this using a layer mask means that I'm now editing in a non-destructive way. So by putting this mask over here and then selecting a brush, and I want to make sure I've got about 40% hardness. Blend mode is normal, opacity 100%. I'm going to bring my flow up to about 60, okay? And I want to make sure that black is my foreground color. And I've got the mask selected, and now I can brush on, and everywhere I brush over is revealing the layer that's underneath, okay? And we can now remove that light stand. And that's it. Now, a couple of things about these two. In the time that I did the first shot and the second shot, what you'll notice is the sun changed. Like it was cloudy, sun going in, sun going out. So that can have a little bit of an impact to what's going on in the background. But aside from that, it's pretty good. All right, so now I've got my shot and I've removed the light. If you make a mistake, let's just say I go too far and I go into the head, I can change from a black as my foreground color to white as my foreground color and just brush back. So that's what I mean by it being non-destructive. I can bring my light stand back if I want by painting black, and if I want to remove that light stand, I paint white, and I could do this till the cows come home. So it's a really good way to remove the light simply and easily from the background. Okay, so you need to make sure that shooting to tripod, everything is locked off, so you make sure that nothing changes, and it's really important that you have the same focus point in your main image as your background image. That's super important. And then bring it into Photoshop, line them up, bring in your layer mask and brush away the light. Okay, so that, and once it's done, you can hit save, and Photoshop will save that and it will appear next to the other edit in Lightroom. So it'll come up as a TIFF in a sec once it's finished saving, just about there, and then you'll see it come up. All right, and there it is. That's our new image. So we've got light removed. Okay, so that's the simple and straightforward way. Another way that I like to use is to actually get the model to step out of the frame altogether. And this just gives me more options, and sometimes it just makes life a lot easier. So what I do is I've taken the shot, I've got my light very close, I've finished shooting, so I've got everything lined up, and then what I do is I ask my model to step out of the frame, and there's an extra step. If you were shooting autofocus, you need to make sure that you lock that focus. So turn your autofocus off so that you still have the same focus point when you shoot your blank plate. So before, when I was using autofocus, the last shot I took was focusing on the model's eyes here, okay? I turn the autofocus off so the camera will remember the last point that it focused on, which was here, and then I can shoot and it'll just shoot the background, okay? And so now I can simply and easily select these two images, right click, edit in, open as layers in Photoshop. All right, so I've got my two images there. Okay, and I don't never assume that I've lined everything up. Sometimes the ground moves, you might knock the tripod, a bee's pippy, you never know. So I always do the following step: select the two layers, edit, auto align layers, hit auto, okay, and Photoshop will just do little micro adjustments. Okay, all right, so that looks pretty good. So you can see that this is a little bit problematic because it was super windy and the clouds were moving a bit, but I should be able to merge these two layers together without too much difficulty. So again, I'm selecting my top layer, adding a layer mask, select my brush, black as my foreground color, and I've got a sort of 40% hardness, blend mode normal, opacity 100%, and my flow is about 60%. And I can just come in and brush, and light, be gone. And then, because I've got the nice soft edge, it blends in there at the edges, and job done like that. So we've got before, after, got rid of the light, and again, file, save. And because I edited this from Lightroom, once I've finished in Photoshop, this will now save next to my original raw files in Lightroom. Okay, so that is that technique. Now I want to show you a third option when you get really good at this, and I highly recommend, please make sure you practice with a tripod and follow the first technique that I showed you. You can also use the option where you ask your model to step out of frame. Don't forget to turn off the autofocus, because otherwise the camera will focus on the background and it's not going to work. So that's really important. Okay, so, and there is the final image. So we've got, with light gone, like magic. And then finally, there are times when you can't use a tripod, or it's just too hard, or you're traveling, and I have had instances where I've done this technique without a tripod. Now, it's not ideal, but you can get really good at it, and it can work. However, please experiment using the tripod technique. Don't try it this way because it's a little bit difficult, but I want to show you what's possible. So, I have my shot here. I've got my model here. He's being lit with a beauty dish. This is a portable beauty dish with a speed light. There's my assistant. This is the shot. I love this shot. I love this lady in the frame. I don't want the assistant with the light in the shot. Now, what I did is I shot lots of different images, okay? And you can see by the way that these are, as I scroll through, I wasn't using a tripod for these, okay? So I was just trying to keep everything lined up, but it was pretty loose, but I still managed to get a blank plate, even though my blank plate is in a similar location. Focal point is the same, but it's a little bit out, but it is still possible. So let me see. I've got my image selected. So this is the one that I want to remove the assistant from. Okay, now I've done a little bit of editing, so what I'm going to do is copy those settings, and here's my blank plate, and I will paste those settings so that now this image has the same settings as this image. Okay, now you can already see how different they are, but they're like, this one is a lot tighter. It's like if I show you the loop info, okay, so this is focal length 95 millimeters, and my blank plate 80 millimeters. So this is slightly wider, but it's still possible to do something. So I've got my main shot here selected. I've got my background image. I've copied the settings to both the images. And now I will go edit, open as layers in Photoshop. Okay, so Photoshop's going to think for a bit, apply the two layers together. Okay, so we've got this one and this one. Now you can already see just how different they are, but we can still have a go at merging these two images together. Okay, so again, what I'm going to do is select the two images, edit, auto align layers, select auto, hit OK. Photoshop's going to think about it, and what it does is you can see, and I'll just turn down the opacity. Okay, so what it's done is it's matched the background, okay, and we've got our top layer which is lit, and it's not exactly, you can see the edge here, it's a lot smaller, but it's done a pretty good job of lining those two up. And now what I can do is, again, add my layer mask, brush tool. I'm going to, because I'm going to be brushing quite close to my model here, I'm going to increase the hardness a little bit so that I'm not brushing over my model. All right, so, and then I can just start brushing here. And you can see that it's done a really good job. And the other thing I can do is I've actually saved this end of the image. Okay, and it's just getting rid of that. Now, once I'm away from... Okay, now, if I come all the way down, I'm going to lose the edge of my image, and I want to hang on to this little edge, so I might just use another technique to get rid of the model's, assistant's feet, because I don't want to lose that edge of the frame. Okay, and so pretty happy with that. So now I can actually incorporate much of this frame, and I can maybe just blend the edge a little bit. So I'll just drop the hardness to 0, and I'm just blending the edge of the frame here, just so you can't see that, and just blending here, just so I save this extra part of the image. So I'm just coming around here. So you can just see how versatile this particular technique is. Okay, and remember, you can just change from painting with black to painting with white if you want to fix any mistakes. So let me see if I can get rid of this little pole here, because that's annoying. And so I've managed to rescue, we'll just bring back the edge of. Okay, so you can see that I've managed to remove the assistant to a point. Now, what I can do now is I can either try and use content aware fill just to get rid of the shoes here, or I can use the clone stamp. So what I'm going to try and do is use content aware fill. So what am I going to do? Command Option Shift E, put that onto its own layer, and then make a selection of the shoes. So I made a circle there. I'm going to hold down the Shift key and make another circle. With content aware fill, you want to make sure that you're as close to the subject as possible. And as I mentioned, there is a long and detailed tutorial on how to do this, but I just wanted to finish this tutorial by showing you what else is possible using this technique, because it's not always the same, and sometimes you can't always be using a tripod. So it's just these shoes that I want to get rid of now. So it's Edit, Content Aware Fill, and we will let Photoshop do its magic, and it's done a pretty good job. So let's just have a look. That looks pretty good. What I might do is just, because what happens with content aware fill is it automatically selects the area that it's going to use to fill the content, and so I'm just going to take away some areas that it doesn't need, and hopefully it'll give us a better fill there, and that looks pretty good. So hit OK, and there we have it. We got rid of the shoes. Okay, so you could muck around and come around and use the clone stamp for that, but you get the idea, and then hit File, Save. That will merge those images and bring them back into Lightroom. And once the final image is in Lightroom, you can crop it down. So that's one I've done before, and let's have a look at this new one where I tried to save a little bit more of the background. Should be coming in. Still saving. All right, that should be in now. Here it is. Okay, let's have a look. There it is, and now I can just crop, because I've got to, we'll just line it up, straighten it up. Crop in. And there you go. So that is doing it freehand, which is, as I said, it's not ideal. You can see that it has its limitations. You lose areas and it's a lot harder to do. So I actually recommend that you follow this technique using the tripod, and you get some fantastic results, and it allows you to get the light nice and close in the frame. Yes, it's all extra work, and a lot of people wouldn't bother doing this. There are a lot of photographers that will just shoot so that their light is always out of the frame because they don't want to do the extra work. But, you know, I think you can see for yourselves what a difference it makes with how good the lighting looks when you can bring it in nice and close. So I think it's worth the effort. It's definitely worth the effort.